Okay, so today we're going to be doing the cloth and the hair. So far I've put some rough hair on, and you can see close up that it balances the head shape very nicely. Whereas it looked kind of weird, bald. Now it's all sort of framed nicely. So I think I'm happy with the head size, and I'll leave it. But this hair is just really quick thrown on, so I'll do it again for the demo, and then we'll do some clothing stuff. Okay, so first thing we're going to do is get some clay flattened out. I've got chunks of clay here that I just sliced up from the original chunk of the brick, and we're going to pass them through the pasta maker to make it nice and even. Now, you really just don't want to have air bubbles, that's all. If you have a few, it's not going to be the end of the world, but you want to put it through enough times that you take out the cracks and things. You want a smooth, clean surface. So just getting a rough amount of clay and folding it over itself a few times. If you ever have that, there's actually a thinner you can buy, this liquid you can add to it. You'll notice this firmer clay has a tendency to crack. So it's just the price you pay. Otherwise you'd have really flimsy, soft clay that just melts in your hand, and you don't want that either. So you have to sort of put up with this tendency to crack. But setting it to a thinner setting, running it through again, that's when it starts to get nice and smooth. I'll do it at the thinnest just to show. Probably wouldn't do it that thin for rough hair, but actually I'm going to keep, no, I'll just do it again. So there we go. That's number 6. And it's actually almost see-through if you hold it up to a light. The beige clay, the skin-colored clay, is actually translucent when you get this thin, which is why it has that nice skin-like subsurface scattering. It's because the clay itself is sort of translucent. But that's going to be our base cloth that we stick on. Now, at this scale, this ends up being sort of a thick leather. You can see it's not very thin like cloth, but for the most part it works really well. And for capes, this is kind of ideal. You may want to have some sort of support structure if you want the cape to actually stay where you put it, especially in a design like this. It's very specific. So you'll see. With the hair, if it's a little bit thick, you can get it to stay in enough of a position like this that it's going to be fine. So I'll start with the hair, and then we'll work on the draping method of putting some pieces on and then just measuring on the model and cutting them out to fit. It works really well. So this, I didn't press this on very hard, so you'll see I can just peel off, and I still have my bald head underneath. So it's exactly what we'll do for the clothing at the beginning too. Now if you baked it, of course this would be even easier to do, but as I said before, you can see that even unbaked I can still take off a layer if I don't mix it and smooth it in quite easily. So it's a useful method to be able to experiment a little bit. And now the head, there's a little bit of an air pocket in there. You can see it wants to shake a little bit, but I'm okay with it. I know I've got enough clay around the neck that I don't want to squish this, so I'm really going to just leave it alone and not break it if it's not. I'm not going to try to fix it if it's not broken. So I'm pretty confident though with the size. I ended up noticing as I was working on it, I noticed that the shoulder blades needed a little bit more volume to them once I saw it all together. So see, with the shoulder this far back, you would see this bone sticking out more. So I added a couple rough pieces on just to feel the volume out. But it's really close now. I'm pretty happy with all that. So it's enough to move on, and then the rest is just the fine-tuning, cleanup stuff. But for sure, let's get started with the hair. So the hair, you can see it ended up being just these 3 pieces. I'm going to do a little bit more to it this time, but I'll show you the basic process. So using the pasta maker is good for this because it gives you a nice even piece. Now you got to decide a little bit ahead of time what you're going to do with the hair as far as length goes, but you don't need to have it 100%. The whole beauty of this sort of method is you can experiment with it as you go and make it fit to what you think looks good right on the model. But if you had a very strict concept that you were trying to match, then of course you'd have to plan it out a little bit better. So I think I'm going to go with looks like a 3 on the pasta maker here. That might even be a little thick. I have a 4. Yeah, that's about where I had it. And that feels good. So I'm going to make a few of these pieces and then sort of just cut them out into rough shapes. And we'll put them on. Okay, so it's nice to have a nice even thickness. You may want to drape it on a little bit to feel how it bends. You can see if it's thick enough, it'll hold its curl, and that should be enough. Now you're going to carve into it and add texture to it later, but for now I just like to put on the big chunks just to get it started. So this is a very similar method to the way you would do cloth, but we're starting with this kind of shape because it's a little bit more forgiving. So right now I'm focusing on this back side. And I'm going to cut it along the rough parting of the hair. Something like that. Right now I'm just cutting it against my finger. So the other way to do it is to lay it down on something and cut out a piece ahead of time. So if you wanted to measure, let's say, a piece of armband or something like that, you can put it up to the model, make your little marks, and then cut it flat. It's a little easier. So this, I can see the rough idea of the length. Let's go with something like that. And now just let's see here. I'll just start making some smaller strips. Just have a little bit of a cleaner edge. So again, in case I mess up, I'm not gonna push too hard. Just getting it stuck enough that I can see it's the right length, volume. It feels pretty good. So yeah, this is just a little bit too thin. I'm going to put this back through at 4. There we go. Nice smooth piece. That's my rough length. So now I'm just thinking about the front piece. I want to have sort of a shape like that. Comes over one eye. I'm saving that for last because it is a piece that goes on top. It'll be harder to get it in the right place if I put it down first. So it's about the rough shape for it. I'll leave it sitting there. And you feel bad covering up the ears if you spent time on them, but that's the way it is. Let's see here. Doing it in these strips like this forces you to think about how the clumps of hair would blow in the wind if you're doing that sort of style. Since this is an action pose, that the characters pose like that, I want to make sure I do that. And then later on, I'll draw some texture on there and cut up the ends, pointier bits. But this is just getting the rough volume on. But already it sort of feels pretty good. So it's a little too much at the top, so I'm going to skinny that up. Both ends. Like that. Now I can experiment with different positions of that, see what I like. Maybe not up there. Just keeping the options open. Now I'm thinking about where the hairline would end. Coming down on the part, I'm moving it slightly to the side to match what the photo reference looks like more than this comic book drawing. So the hair is coming down in front, you're not seeing the poof up, which is fine. Maybe I'll come up a little bit in the front there. It's not bad. Much nicer, huh? Okay, now the other side, I need a couple more pieces. I think it's pretty good. Now, I probably won't finish the hair until I get further along, but I like having it on there in this stage, at least to match this level of detail. It's good. split that in two. Better. Cut a little bit. This one's a little too thick by ear, so I'm going to just cheat and cut a little bit away. I don't want it all bunched up there. I'm trying to tuck it behind the ear here without squishing it. There we go. Maybe one more. I think we're pretty good. Vary the length a little bit to match the other side. Something like that. I can refine this hairline later. The rough volume of the hair is looking much better. So hopefully you can see where that's going. I'm pretty happy with it. I like that I did the experiment at first too, seeing the rough shape. It's changed quite a bit, but I think this is a lot better. Okay, so now for clothing, there's several things you can do. Now, if you have pants like this, they're pretty skin tight. So all that muscle work you did is going to help at this stage because you don't really need to do anything else if it's going to be just skin tight. Now, for doing the wrinkles and cloth and stuff, they're still going to have some. So even on this concept, see at the knees, the ankles, and the waist, there's going to be some wrinkles. And having your thin piece of clay rolled out is still going to be useful for that. So I'll just show you a couple ideas of how to throw on some cloth wrinkles for the simple parts, and then a draping over for bigger areas. Okay, there we go. So the basic process at this point is just getting your piece smoothed out, cutting away the junky edges, and then using it as if it were a big piece of cloth. Now, if you had a pasta maker that went a little thinner than that, it might be better, but this is what I've been using and it seems to work. So I'm just going to cut myself a small chunk. And so for wrinkles and things, if you really wanted it flatter than this, you can get a rolling pin, but you got to be careful. This clay is a little sticky, and it even sticks to this stainless steel sometimes if you get it too warm before putting it in. But a rolling pin would work. You could get it even thinner than this, but for now, we're just gonna go from here. So focus down here on the knee. So what you can do when you're draping cloth like this, if you want to create a wrinkle, it's pretty easy. You would just basically stick on the top as if you were starting before the bend of something like a knee, and then what you can do is stick it around and then sort of bend it like you just bent the cloth. So it gives you a rough start of a wrinkle like that. Otherwise, the other method is to take little strips. So if you're really going for skin tight leather or spandex or something, you just want to do a little strip and then sculpt it into a wrinkle. But you get the rough idea there is all you need to know for big pieces of clothing. So again, if I wanted to do a wrinkle there, you have to get some reference, so some photo reference would be really helpful. But you can just add on strips like this in the shape of a wrinkle and smooth the edges, and then you're pretty much done. It's not too hard. The hardest work is getting that proportions and volume right in the first stages. So like that, and then smooth it out. And adding seams, of course, would help. So if your skin is smooth enough, you can just go right down it. Whoops, let me erase that. But it's a finishing step. You wouldn't want to do that until the very end. But I could run a seam down like that. And if you wanted to make it look like overlapping pieces of cloth, you just have to get one of them and push it a little lower on one of the sides. I don't know if you can see that. Maybe zoom into that thigh there. And just focus on this area. So right here, I'm pushing only on one side of the line. And then I'm going to go back on the other side and push a little bit lighter. Make sort of that stitch bump. Without having to add a whole nother piece of cloth. Now, if I wanted to, I could just add a thin strip and smooth out the one side like that as well. And then how much crazy detail you go into after this, I mean, you know, every stitch, I don't know about that, but You could also just hint at it like this. Not very clean, but you get the idea. So, again, at the waist, I want a few wrinkles there, so I'm gonna keep this clay. Now you'll notice this clay that I used already, I wrinkled it around the knee. It's actually got this nice wrinkle that's sort of still in it. So you can use that to your advantage if you know where you want to put a wrinkle. It helps to have it sort of already in that sort of shape. You can just experiment with it, see how it looks. This again, I don't want to mess with the shape that's under there because I think it's pretty good where it's at. So for the belt area, then I'll definitely add a strip. So go here. I'm going to measure it out on the model. Just marking it with my finger. Cut a nice straight piece on this flat area and then stick it on. If you want to add any detail pieces, now would be the time instead of waiting until it's up on the model. Add a little strip, utility belts type stuff, whatever you want to add. So either with an add-on strip or just create a bump with a roll. It's a little too thick still. Just adding that belt line makes it look like she's wearing pants. The wrinkles make a big difference. Now, a couple other things. So again, the other way to add just an edge, if you want to make it look like, let's say a skin tight top up here, you could just add that ridge. That's the seam, the cloth, the hem, whatever, the edge, you know what I'm talking about. So instead of just pushing in, if I don't want to destroy what's there, I can just add a little ridge, smooth out the one side, and I've got it pretty much done on that spot. It's just nice to have that shadow cut in, like it makes it look like something's on top. Pretty much just by doing that. Okay, so now for capes and things like that, you're going to need to get wire and probably work some sort of wire in to support the edge. Now you don't need to worry about all the stuff back in there, so the clay will hold that shape by itself. And especially this part in the back looks like it's resting against the back leg, so again that's another point where it's sort of supporting itself. But this part, it's hanging down but back, and if you want to have that really nice controlled curve, you're going to have to put something in there. Now, the thick wire is probably way too thick for that, but this thin wire is not too bad. Now, I don't need to build a whole cage or a zigzag structure or anything like that. I just need to get something poked in the shoulder and coming down so that when I put that big piece on, it'll stay. Now, getting a piece that big is going to be the trick, because I don't know if you notice this, if you were to flatten this out from the points of the cape, it would be almost a giant circle, or at least a half a circle. So I'll just get started here, and then we'll come back and look at it later. But the rest of it is just how much time you want to put into finishing it. You know, the smoothing is it's just time. Get a feel for the clay eventually, and you don't really think about it after a while, but at the beginning it's hard to get it from that sort of rough, scratchy clay look to that really smooth, polished look. You just have to keep working on the same area, pressing it very lightly, work until you get that feel for it. Eventually you'll have that subtle touch. So for this, again, I want to measure and get a rough idea, and then just cut it down. Probably end up with a little extra on purpose, but be able to fix it later. So the smoothness of your wire is going to make a huge difference. You don't want to have a bunch of kinks in it like this, sticking it on. So get that nice and straight. And then this sort of add-on armature, it doesn't need to be screwed or twisted around the original if it's not going to hold up tons and tons of weight. So I can just literally jab it in the shoulder and just leave it there, and it's enough to support this. Actually, the cape does not come out of her shoulder. It is coming out of her back, right behind her chest there. So I'm going to have to move it down a little bit. So just stick it in like that. As long as it's not supporting too much weight, you don't need to tie it around the armature, because it's going to support itself. The weight of the material itself is going to hold the shape from moving from side to side, and all you need is it to be held in the right shape while it's being baked. It will be kind of brittle, a little cape like that, but as long as you don't drop it, you're gonna snap it off. Okay, so that's the rough idea. I'm going to stop it for there and work on it a bit and come back.